welcome to Vision 2018, China Daily's topical coverage of the two sessions. I'm Andrew.
I'm Charlie.
And I'm Ian at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. Each day on the show, we'll be investigating a key issue in depth and examining the day's events to make sense of the decisions that will directly affect the nation.
Costs across economic centers.
But with the help of a more stable yuan, China's economy outperformed in 2017, and the currency is predicted to remain strong and stable against the dollar for some time.
来制定每件事都是向中国人民的反对垄断，继续扩大。中国的人均收入是8000美元，我们正在向1万多美元的水平跃进，进而呢向更高的水平迈进。在这个阶段，高质量发展的主要内涵就是从总量的扩大向结构的优化转变，就是从有没有向好不好的转变。这些不仅为中国，而且可以为全球企业创造着新的发展机会。
February began with the shaky free fall of major global markets, with the Dow plunging just short of 1,600 points in one day. The FTSE 100 also suffered its biggest fall since the Brexit vote. It's widely thought that the markets fell into temporary chaos partly because of concerns over
economy. And then we need to cooperate much more to induce the disadvantaged people, disadvantaged regions, disadvantaged class people, all in industries and companies, all together to come join and join the prosperity of the economic cycle. We have many challenges now, and now the world is heading for the disconnection or segregation in many ways. Not only from some instabilities in Europe, but also in America and in developing countries. We are now observing the lack of the generosity and lack of the patience. And all of things we can say that there's a growing concern. And then to overcome this kind of problems, then we need to be more corporate work between among the countries of G20. And the G20 countries can represent more than 80% or 90% of the world economy. And then we need to cooperate much more to induce the disadvantaged people, disadvantaged regions, disadvantaged class of people, all in industries and companies, all together to come join and join this prosperity of the economic cycle. And so G20 must cooperate, towards this interconnectivity or the interconnectedness of this economy.
I think what President Xi Jinping has noted is absolutely correct. And when I look at the Chinese priorities document for G20, I think the major message is that there is the need for cooperation in this world now. Kind of a message is already embedded there. I think that's valuable. It is obvious that we cannot find a solution to our problems without cooperation between the countries. And I think now we need a new type of policy cooperation for the development issues, basically. And I see a good opportunity when it comes to this new SDG framework, Sustainable Development Goals that were accepted at the United Nations in New York this year. And it is good to see that in the Chinese priorities document again, the document is talking about asking from G20 countries their plans for sustainable development, national plans for the SDGs. I think this is a step in the right direction because quantitative targets are, there are always quantitative targets within the G20 framework for everything.
Well, China is a major player in world economy today. So I do believe that China will have an important role to play in future. more than in the past in its governance structure of the financial structure of the world as a whole. And as regards the developing countries or emerging markets, China has already established a long-standing cooperation with most of them. China is the largest and most successful emerging market, and therefore can provide financial and technical assistance, can promote trade with these countries through infrastructure development, and through FDI or foreign direct investment can provide really support to the growth of the industrial base of those emerging markets. So there are many different ways that China and emerging markets can cooperate, and I believe will cooperate in the future.
Now with more on the economic outlook for 2018, our correspondent Ian is live at the Great Hall of the People.
Thank you both. The annual Work of the Government report released during the 2 sessions this year revealed that China's GDP rose from 54 trillion to 82.7 trillion yuan. China's share in the global economy also grew by 3.6% to reach 15%. Some of the main targets for economic and social development for the coming year include GDP growth of around 6.5%, developing new industrial clusters in emerging industries, and achieving a deficit percentage of 2.6, 0.4 percentage points lower than last year. While personal income was increased by an annual average of 7.4%, inequalities in income distribution still remain, and closing the income gap is another government target. Comprehensive countermeasures are also needed in order to cool the housing market, and the redirection of industries following further cuts to steel and coal production could, for the short term, lead to slight unpredictability as the market readjusts to these changes. But the government's 2018 targets remain within reach, while also considering long-term goals for the country. Back to you.
That's our correspondent Ian live for us at the Great Hall of the People. Now, at the end of 2017, China's top regulators released draft guidelines for the new asset management rules. China is increasingly focused on reducing its shadow banking system. The system has the potential to affect the entire economy and even lead to an abrupt halt in bank lending.
The shadow banking sector has grown rapidly in recent years as regulators have imposed limits on the economy's riskier channels. The sector itself is mostly made up of private equity and hedge funds, mortgage brokers, and in some wider cases, investment banks. The difference is that shadow banks are subject to far less regulation, and unlike traditional banks, do not take loan deposits. Instead, they rely on short-term collateral for funding, meaning they can increase their profits by leveraging more than their traditional counterparts, creating risks within the financial system. So it was generally thought that financial tightening of these other riskier assets would exert some pressure on the stock market.
However, as the government plans to increase special bonds issued by 550 billion yuan year on year and implement measures to control these economic risks, it appears more likely that growth and sustainability will be secured through an increasingly confident economy. Finance Minister Xiao Jie announced during the 2 sessions that China's debt ratio is expected to remain stable, with its debt to GDP ratio dropping to 36.2% in 2017 from 36.7% in 2016. This is far below the global danger zone of around 60%. Now, let's take a closer look at more of China's economic plans for the coming year.
China 中国这个战略调整确实在稳步的推进，所以要牢记这个我们的经济增长速度在逐渐减速，而我们的质量在逐渐的提高。
就能解决的就是这一个提高全药的生产率。我觉得这个因素的话，就是使得中国是进行出台一些实在的政策，也促进那个全药生产率的快速提升。比如说对这个加强的知识产权保护啊，加大实体投资，还对这个科研资金的一个有效的配置和有效的应用。
但是呢，永生球性呢，它也不是一个短期的形态，可能说呢，它是统领了未来3年、5年的一个政策的结构，发挥市场的活力。
我们现在想提高这个以稳供给侧结构性改革为主线，就是要提高我们的全球市场产业，提高供给质量。
There are, nonetheless, challenges for any economy. Supply-side structural reform is vital for industrial development, but it is also reshaping China's economy. This industrial transformation could lead to a temporary rise in unemployment as businesses adjust. Speaking at a panel discussion with deputies to the NPC last week, President Xi stressed the importance of improving China's economic structure and building a modern economic system by strengthening such industries as IT technology, low-carbon development, and the oceanic economy.
Key objectives of the reform have also included cutting excess production capacity and increasing competitiveness of the development environment and improving opportunities for more innovative development. Supply-side reform is, in essence, becoming China's primary economic driving force.
Observe an incredible rebalancing of the Chinese economy. I call it the great pivot, from investment to consumption, from industry to services, reducing the current account deficit and moving from mechanical to digital at a faster pace than anyone else.
Free trade is a very good medicine for the crisis. Beggar thy neighbor will reduce trade. We must pursue inclusive growth. Exports don't reduce jobs. They actually multiply them. Trade imbalances cannot be the reason to reduce trade.
Following years of rapid growth, China is currently in a phase of transition into a stage of high-quality development. In his report delivered at the 19th CPC National Congress, President Xi began outlining a new vision for the development of a modernized economy as part of the country's national rejuvenation.
President Xi also pledged to foster new growth areas in innovation-driven development, a green and low-carbon economy, and modern supply chains.
I spoke to Lawrence Braun, CCG scholar, about his thoughts on the Chinese economy.
I think it's about efficiencies. And so I have my own kids are in the school system here, and I look at the China educational system versus the educational system in my own country, the United States. And you have a far higher rate of illiteracy in America than you do in, of course, China. You have now far more advanced programs here at a much earlier age on mathematics, science, computer programming.
Do you think that could be a extra pressure for your kids?
Of course it's a pressure, and I think they don't like it, of course. In America, you can watch, YouTube all day, and you can, play with, social media and get through school. It's not a problem. The result is, though, if you go to Silicon Valley, who's doing all the programming? They're kids from either India or China. The American kids might be the CEOs or the managers of, they might go to the parties, but they're not driving the technology. And so, Elon Musk talks about, he's the founder of Tesla. Tesla is in the market as a high-end product here in China. Of course, very rich people have a Tesla. But the reality is by 2025, electronic cars will be mandatory in China. Right now, even in this hutong, or this ancient alleyway, there's electric car filling stations already being put in. I believe there's going to be nearly 2 million of these within the next 2-3 years, electric car filling stations. And so again, you have this macro control system or macro control economy where the government will be coming in and using policy to drive the market. But what it's going to do is it's going to force all the car manufacturers to move over to electric cars. And one of the advanced areas that's also progressing is solar grids. So we're going to have really green transportation. And so Elon Musk's idea, the Tesla car, the electric car, which is brilliant, is still in the context of the United States an elitist product. It's something that it's a brand. It's something that people have to show off. I'm environmentally conscious, but I can afford to be.
The reality is we cannot afford to not be environmentally conscious if we want to have a planet to live on. And in this case, China with the ecological civilization policy, which again is using planning to drive market toward protecting the environment as the next mega trend, is going to drive forward the use of electronic cars. It's going to drive forward the use of artificial intelligence. Today, China is the single largest investor in artificial intelligence and the largest investor in research on quantum physics and quantum mechanics and the application of that science to medical, to health, to transportation, to communications. In America, quantum physics is something that, Buddhists in San Francisco talk about. It's not a focus of investment. If you talk to most people there, they don't even know what it is. And so you have different priorities and a different focus. And he's worried about China being a threat. Elon Musk in his Twitter was saying it could be a threat because of its speed and efficiency of development. And he used, I think, the example of a high-speed rail network being built in 9 hours, or a station in 9 hours. Let's just think about priorities. China's whole program of Belt and Road, or many, if you think about and you start to list Myanmar, Vietnam, Laos, India, Bhutan, Nepal, you have Tajikistan, you have Afghanistan, you have Pakistan, you have Russia, you have Mongolia, you have a lot of, I think Kazakhstan shares a border. You've got so many countries with so much diversity bordering China. In America, you only have Canada and Mexico. And if you think about it, China needs to have peace with all these countries for economic development. And the only way that's going to happen is if these countries also have economic development. So the Belt and Road is moving out progressively to try and create the same infrastructure that allowed China to get ahead, to allow these countries to get ahead. And in turn, China is going to be the major investor. And one of the key things is peace and stability in the region. Why? China is going to be exporting what? High-speed rail systems. Today, 1/3 of all high-speed rail systems in the world are exported from China. At the same time, if we think about it, 1/3 of all military weapons in circulation in the world are being exported from the United States. Obviously, the two countries' economic priorities are different.
And that concludes today's installment of Vision 2018.
From all of us at China Daily, thank you once again for joining us, and join us again soon.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.